Welcome, everybody. I want to say thank you first to our esteemed guests. We have two people on here who are engineers in the engineering field, and then one who's in architecture. I want to welcome, and uh, I'd like to start. Let me share my screen first. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is part 5 in the career series that Irvington High School PTSA has been hosting different industries. Tonight we're doing exploring engineering as well as I have a speaker on architecture. So we could look at the differences. I looked up on US News World Report, what are the best schools for engineering for 2023, 2024? And you could see here's a partial list of the top schools and with the cost. Some of them have an in-state versus out-of-state cost. So yeah, and then there's a link to where I found this information. Areas of engineering that your child can study is either civil engineering, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, or industrial engineering. Those are the main areas of engineering. If you basically are going to say, well, what about software engineering? That mostly falls under computer science. And I will have a separate session on that one. How to become an engineer? You have to obtain an undergraduate degree in the engineering field you'd like to go into. And then there's some exams to pass. You have to pass the NCEES FE exam, apply for state licensure to get certification to be an engineer in training. Then you need to obtain experience on the job training in the engineering field that you want to be in. And then pass the NCEES PE exam. And after you've got all the exams passed and certified, then yes, start your job search for engineering. What is the FE exam? FE is Fundamentals of Engineering exam. It's about over 5 hours long, and it includes 110 questions. I believe it's multiple choice. And they usually would be taking this exam when they're close to finishing their undergraduate engineering degree. What is a PE exam? The Principles and Practice of Engineering exam, which is over 8 hours long on the computer. And people of taking it are engineers who have at least 4 years post-college work to take it. Now, this is where the difference is in becoming architect. Architect, you earn a NAAB accredited degree. So basically you look for a college or university that has an architecture program, and you would go there and try to earn the degree there. Participate in an internship program to document the certain number of 3,740 hours of work experience. Pass the architectural registration exam. Pass the California supplemental exam if you want to work as an architect in California. Earn other professional certifications along the way and maintain your license validity by taking continuing ed classes when it need be. This list I've searched on this site, NAAB, okay, which is a Nationally Architectural Accreditation Board site. And you can actually look up schools for architecture based on state. So I just did a search for California. And here are some of the schools. And these are the schools in California that offer degrees in architecture. If you have certain specific questions about like transcripts or anything about, oh, well, what school I should go into for either engineering or for architecture, at Irvington High School, there are 5 counselors based on your last name that you can email and ask them for more help or information. Our Irvington High School's college and career specialist is Bindu Chapla, and your kid can go there to talk to her about maybe if there's any specific resources they need to get into engineering or maybe architecture. She usually is in charge of setting up sessions with different college admissions officers, um, either in person or over Zoom. So your kid can go see her for more information or help on careers. Here are our speakers tonight. We have Jennifer Iochi. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Senior Project Manager at Intuitive Surgical. She has a BS in Industrial Engineering from California Polytechnic State University, MS with honors in Industrial Engineering from California Polytechnic State University, and various certifications that she has garnered from Lockheed Martin, General Assembly, and UCLA. And she's held different management roles at Abbott and Lockheed Martin Space Systems. She graduated, so she's a local girl, graduated from MSJ High School. Rosa Lowe is coming to us. She's zooming in from New York. She's a project engineer at Turner Construction Company. She has a BS in Civil Engineering and Construction Management from NYU Polytechnic School of Engineering. And she's worked in the construction services industry for 9 years now. Our architect on the panel today is Christopher Thomas, project manager at Architect. He has a B Arch from University of Cincinnati, M Arch from San Francisco Institute of Architecture. And he can explain more about what that B Arch and M Arch mean. Okay. So I'll stop share. So then now we can open to have maybe Jennifer start.
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Jen Ayochi. I actually go by Jen. And I am local. I'd actually, based on the way the lines are drawn where my parents live, I'd actually be going to Irvington if the way the lines are drawn now. So that would be different now, but don't hold that against me. So let's see. What inspired me to go into engineering? Growing up, I really liked math and science. And so my parents kind of guided me towards engineering. However, I didn't want to sit at a desk. So in conversations with my parents, I was worried that if I studied engineering, I'd be sitting at a desk and not getting out very much. And I was kind of a timid child growing up, and so I wasn't sure that I knew I liked working with people, but I was also timid. And so in talking to my parents, I thought, well, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do engineering. And my dad was actually an industrial engineer. My mom had studied industrial technology. They both went to San Jose State. And so I had an opportunity to kind of get an understanding of what industrial engineering was right away, because a lot of people don't actually know about industrial engineering. And so industrial engineering is one of those engineering degrees where you kind of get a lot of the engineering background, but you get a lot of people focus, a lot of management focus, a lot of process focus. And so I got a lot of just a lot of engineering and a lot of people, and I really enjoyed it. And I got, I didn't see Cal Poly on the list of top schools that was presented, but it usually is identified as one of the top engineering schools. And it was one of the best colleges for me because I like to learn by doing. And that's one of Cal Poly's big phrases there. There's a lot of labs at Cal Poly. And so that's one of the reasons why I think I was successful there. A lot of the science and engineering classes came with labs where we didn't just talk about doing things, we actually got to put it to the test and actually do everything. So that was really great. And then as far as my experience in school, I really enjoyed it. That was my first time away from home, and I didn't go far, right? San Luis Obispo is only about 3.5 hours from here, halfway between here and LA. So it's far enough where my parents can come visit and I can come home and visit. And so that was nice. And there's a lot of local kids who went down to Cal Poly or to Cuesta, the junior college there. So it's really fun to be around some people that I recognize, but really fun to be with new people as well. I lived in the dorms, which was really fun. But I really got to focus on my studies as well, but still have some fun as well. Um, After I stayed for my master's, Cal Poly had what's called a 4+1 program, and don't let me mistakenly communicate that. The undergraduate program at Cal Poly actually took me more than 4 years because it is a learn by doing school. They really focus on co-ops and internships. And so I think I got my first internship my sophomore, or maybe it was my junior year. And so at the time I had internships by the time I graduated at Sun Microsystems as a process engineer. I had worked 2.5 summers there. I worked at New United Motors as a summer intern, and then I'd worked at Apple Computers. So I think my total undergrad time there was a little over 6 years, but I had come out of Cal Poly with a lot of work experience. And so finding a job was quite easy. But again, I had stayed for the master's program. A lot of my undergraduate courses counted towards my master's curriculum. So it really only took me two more quarters plus a thesis to finish my master's degree in industrial engineering as well. So that was a really great opportunity for me. And then I started at Lockheed Martin. I actually had a pretty long career there. I was there for about 15 years, doing lots of various activities. I did production planning, I did manufacturing engineering, I did some leadership and operations. So again, engineering kind of got me a foot in the door at a company, but once in the door, I moved around a lot. And it was really just me looking for those right opportunities. And again, engineers are problem solvers. And so finding the right opportunity and solving problems. And I moved my way around. And then I switched careers. I went into med device and worked at Abbott for about 5 years as a manufacturing engineer and moved into leadership there before my recent change into project management at Intuitive. And again, it's more problem solving and trying to put plans together and trying to figure out how we're going to launch products. And I think the coolest thing is trying to figure out how to take a new product conceptually and figuring out how we're going to put together a plan, and then actually waiting to figure out how we're going to execute it, and then actually executing it. It's kind of like going back to working at Lockheed Martin. I was working on commercial satellites, and game day was launch day. I got to actually work in the assembly, test, and launch operations. And so Super Bowl day was when we got to see launch. And so that was pretty awesome. And so same thing when we're launching our products. It's pretty fantastic. And so when I think about advice, as I'm talking to the students, and hopefully we've got some students here on the call, I think about why I chose engineering, and it was I like to solve problems, thinking about puzzles, and whether or not, if you're thinking you might want to study engineering, think about what you really like to do, and if it's putting together puzzles or solving problems is something of interest to you, I would highly suggest looking into engineering as an option, because there's a lot of different options that you can go into. Engineering is everywhere. Engineering is in makeup. Engineering is in clothing. Engineering is in automobiles, and it's in pretty much any industry that you can find. And so there's opportunities just about everywhere. And I look forward to any of the questions that you might have for me going forward. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was a lot of information. And I don't know if I probably did have Cal Polytech on the list because I flashed it really quick. But yeah, thank you for going into telling about the program that they have, there. Um, Rosa, would you like to go next?
Sure. So hi everyone. Hi from the East Coast. I'm calling in from New York. I guess just to start off, what inspired me to go into the field of engineering. So my story is very similar to Jen's. When I was in high school, I was predominantly math and science focused, and that's what I loved. That's what I enjoyed. Didn't really enjoy the English subjects or social studies. I was in mathletes, I was in science Olympiads, I was very hands-on in those clubs, and I knew I wanted to take that into my career. And in the beginning, I didn't want to be an engineer. To be honest, I didn't know what an engineer was in high school. That wasn't something that was, a word that was brought up in my family. I thought an engineer was like a train conductor, to be honest. When I was in high school, I thought I was going to be an architect. Chris, we have an architect on the call now, but when I was applying for schools, I realized that you needed a art portfolio, one which I did not have at all. So I put the architect dream aside and said, okay, well, I still like the idea of building something conceptually. It's math and science. Let me just give engineering a try. So I ended up going to NYU, getting my bachelor's in civil engineering with a minor in construction management. And for those of you who aren't as familiar with civil engineering, I describe it as essentially engineering that makes your infrastructure work for us as humans, right? Like if you live in a house and you go to the bathroom, where does that go? How does water get into your house from your faucet? Or how does electricity work in your house? And it's all these little things that make us as a society work. When I was graduating college, I realized that I, too, similar to Jennifer, didn't want to sit at a desk and design. I wanted to take it to the next level. So I had taken my EIT, similar to what Young Pei said, past that, but I had gotten a job at Turner Construction, and that's where I've been at now for the last 9 years. I've been in construction management. So I've been taking my degree and my background and veering courses, and I work for a general contractor where we essentially build. I have been working on interior fit outs in New York City, ranging from commercial spaces, executive offices, hospitals, and wherever they bring me, to be honest. So I'm all over New York City. Some challenges I faced, I think a lot of recent graduates, and I think anyone, school can only teach you so much. You learn more when you're out at your job. So my background in civil engineering only brought me so far. I learned a lot more in the field with my tradesmen, other project managers, coordinating to get that work done than I ever did at school, which I enjoyed because I liked getting down and dirty and learning real life experiences. Some of my day-to-day responsibilities is I deal with a lot of design team members, so architects, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers. I also deal with a lot of trade partners, so people that are hired to build interior fit outs, mechanical trades, plumbing trades, electrical trades, also deal with the client. So my main role is sort of the liaison between the design team and ownership. And my team, we manage creating a project, whatever it is. So whatever the design team has on paper, getting questions answered, managing that process to get that into job completion. And I think that's one of the most rewarding things, seeing something that's a typical, either a white box or older space, revamping it in a couple months and really seeing all the hard work that you've put into and seeing the design that was on paper in real life and just knowing all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it. That's extremely rewarding. Any advice that I would have for students entering what my field is that there's always going to be a problem, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think if you have the interest to solve problems and having that as a challenge, that'll take you very far. And there's never 2 days that are the same in what I do. And that's what I really like most about it.
Thanks, Rosa, for sharing your journey. Yeah, I'm interested to know whether you and Jennifer had encountered any issues being female, because I don't know if engineering used to be predominantly male dominated. Um, would you say that either of you had any issues, either in studying engineering in school as well as into the workforce, being female?
Mm.
Can you
And
go first?
sure. In my classes, there were, I remember my one mechanical engineering statics class. There was like 5 of the like maybe 30 classmates there that were female. But other than that, it was more of a competition of like, hey, can us ladies do better than the guys on the tests? But there wasn't, other than that, there wasn't any problems, or I didn't feel any other challenge other than it was we saw it as a competition. However, at Lockheed Martin, it's an older company, and as a female starting there, I definitely felt that there was some challenges for me there, especially being a young female driven employee. There was a lot of like, wait your turn, just being young also. But then there was also the, and even in our documentation, sometimes it referred to a subject matter expert being a graybeard, which was interesting. And so a graybeard is, when I went to the person who wrote the documentation, it was meant to be like again a subject matter expert. But I asked, well, but women don't have graybeards, obviously, right? So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then he thought it was interesting that I even pointed it out, but he did make the change in the documentation. But something like that, I said, is probably not appropriate, right? Because women can be subject matter experts as well.
For me, I think when I was in school, I think in our class it was about 30% female. So we were definitely outnumbered by the males because it's just a typical male dominated subject and field. And same thing with work now. It's still a male dominated field, but I never felt different or pressured. If anything, I wore it with pride, that I was able to conquer this field and not feel pressured or shy. And I'm pretty mouthy, so if someone was trying to pull the intimidating card, it didn't go so well for them in the end. So I guess they learned a lesson the hard way.
Thank you, ladies. We're gonna switch gears into talking about architecture, and I will have Chris talk about the differences between architecture and engineering, and his journey of getting into architecture. Chris?
Yes, thank you, Yunpei. So, yes, as she said, I'm an architect. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. And the decision to enter into architecture apparently made it early in life, because in my 8th grade yearbook, I said I was going to be an architect, and it actually came true. I don't come from a family of architects. Nobody I'm related to is an architect. In growing up, when I was in high school trying to make decisions, there was no internet. Information wasn't nearly as readily available as it is right now. I was introduced to the profession because I knew one architect. That was our neighbor across the street. He was friends of our family. And it was through him that I learned what the profession was. And took an interest in it because I find floor plans to be fascinating. And I think that's sort of something that Rosa was talking about too. It's I look at them and study them, and it was something that appealed to me. And then in high school, I took a psychology class elective, and we had an interesting assignment one day in that class where we were asked to look at these on a two-dimensional sheet of paper, drawings of three-dimensional things, and to rotate them in our minds. It might be like a dice or something, and if this number's on this side, what's the number on the opposite side? If it's, there's a description of it. There's 5 questions, and in our whole class of 35 students, none of us got all 5 right. And then the teacher asked, well, how many people got 4 right? And only me and one other student got 4 of them right. And that's when I realized that, maybe I do have some talent for seeing things spatially beyond just what an average person has. And I think that sort of reinforced to me that this might be the right career path to go. I applied to 3 colleges. In just kind of a side note, so architecture typically is taught like in a different college than engineering, usually something like built environments, or sometimes in the fine arts college. And then I got accepted to all 3 places that I applied, and being naive and not knowing it, I thought that was just a formality. I didn't even realize it was something to celebrate that you get accepted. I've learned since then that it's actually pretty exciting if you get accepted in the places that you've selected. Architecture is a highly selective admission process, from what I heard from the universities. And I should also mention that the study of architecture, most of the classes are specific to architecture. In college, I only took a few English classes and some electives that were within the general university population. Almost all the classes I took were just for architecture majors. There's about 60 of us in my class. And we got to know everybody really well. By the time we graduated, we knew each other's life story because we just see the same people again and again. Anytime you're doing group assignments, typically you're grouping up the same way. So I graduated with the B.Arch degree that we mentioned. That was a 6-year degree. Most universities offer it in 5. Mine was a little bit different because there's a co-op internship involved. And then the next part of the process is documenting work experience, and that is allowed to overlap with the degree. So I was already working towards that before I graduated. And then I was documenting that work experience even while I was starting to take those exams. When I was going through the process, it was 9 exams. Now they've shrunk it down to 6. And then and that took me about 2.5 years to get through the exams, and then about another 1.5 years after that to get through the California exam. In the California exam, at the time I took it was actually in-person exams. You met across from people and sat at a table, but now it's become a computerized exam. So it's the question about challenges along the way. I would say that for me it was finding a mentor, and it was something I didn't even realize I needed. But when I was in college, you hear lots of different things, and you hear lots of different advice. It's better to do this or it's better to do that. Study. Should you study the whole building? Should you study details? Is it better to work? Big projects or small projects? And when I found a mentor in one of my bosses at one of my internships, it wasn't the first or the second, it was the third one. And he has since passed away, unfortunately, but through him, I really felt like my career gained direction that it didn't have until then. And I guess that'd be an advice that I would give people is to if you can get a mentor, it's not the first architect that you meet, right? The first engineer that you meet, right? But it's somebody that, in my case, I was about 22 years old. He was 70. He was toward the end of his career. but he had a lot of wisdom, and we got along really well. And it just became the process of me going to him and saying, I'm faced with this decision. And this wasn't all this decisions related to the office that we were working in. He gave me advice on how to do my thesis project. When I told him I wanted to move to California after graduation, he gave me advice on how to find my first job. And that really helped. As far as the day-to-day responsibilities, so architecture, just in a nutshell, if you're building a building, not a single family house, that kind of follows a different path, but anything else, you have an architect who's sort of at the front end of the design process, with a lot of consultants that work with the architect. And those would be like your structural engineer, your civil engineer. I mean, you can get into very specific things and get down to like an acoustical consultant, sustainability consultant, all these people working together, but under the lead of the architect, designs the building, and then a general contractor such as Turner Construction is in charge of the construction of the building, and then all the sub fields, whether it be rough framing, millwork, painting, carpet, all that would work under the general contractors. That's where the two sort of tie together. When you're entering the field of architecture, a lot of the early jobs advertisements will probably talk about like what's a computer software, they're looking for people who can draft, who can draw things. We draw everything on the computer now. And but then, as I've been in the profession 20 years now, and I'm kind of at the point where I don't really draw a whole lot anymore. And a lot of that is also because of the billing rate. The longer you've been in the profession, the higher your billing rate gets, and it just doesn't become cost effective to be doing the drawing. So now I'm doing the managing the people within my office who are working on the projects that I have, as well as managing the consultants and managing the city process of getting permits, which we do through the city building department. I guess just advice for students, the advice I would give would be, choosing what to study, what career to go into. You're planning out the next 30, 40 years of your life. I would say to choose something, don't just settle for something that you're good at that makes money. It has to be something you enjoy, because you're just going to be doing it all the time, and just it gets to a point where it's just it can't just be for the money, right? It's just, this is your full-time career. Just make sure it's something you enjoy.
Oh, thank you so much about Chris, for telling us about architecture and what it takes to be that. I'd like us to move into Q&A time. So if anybody has any question, if you can either put a raised hand, or maybe type in the chat for our engineers. I see somebody has written something in the chat. It says, can you talk about what your engineering major is about? What knowledge and skills are necessary to prepare for the study? If you can start again, would you make the same decision? So I think at the beginning, I don't know if you came in late, but I think they went over a little bit of what their engineering major was. They could talk about what skills is needed in their line of engineering, and also Chris already talked about what is necessary skills for architecture. And then they can, I guess you guys can answer the question of, if you had to start over again, would you make the same decision to go into your field?
I can answer this first. So I guess for me, I studied civil engineering, if you weren't in the beginning of the call, and very math and science oriented, so a lot of calculus, a lot of physics. But ironically, there were also a lot of classes on like communication and working in a team, because at the end of the day, like, yes, you can be good at math, yes, you can be good at science, but how do you work with other consultants or design team members to get your point across, or even communicate effectively? So I know at the end of my college sessions, like in my senior year, there was a lot of like putting together like presentations and doing our senior capsule project, and most of it was just about presenting it to our professors at the end of the school year. I think that was the most important skill that I still have with me today. If I had to start again, would I make the same decision? I think I would. I didn't realize how well suited I was for being in construction. You know, I like seeing things being built. And I didn't realize that when I was in high school. But luckily, it worked out for me.
Did Jen, did you have anything to say about?
Sure. So I think it's interesting because I would say the same thing as Rosa, right? She studied civil engineering and I studied industrial engineering, and we probably took pretty much the similar amount of calculus classes, physics classes, and probably the same amount of EE classes. She probably took a lot more civil engineering classes and probably mechanical engineering classes. Excuse me. But at the end of the day, what I remember from my biggest takeaway from college and engineering courses was that we learned how to be a part of a team, but even more so, we learned the importance of the various functional areas and how to talk to each other, right? Because when we're at work, we don't just work with, I don't work with industrial engineers, right? I actually, in my career, I've never worked as an industrial engineer. I've been a production planner, I've been a manufacturing engineer, I've been an operations leader, I'm now a project manager, right? But I work with cross-functional people. And so as an engineer, I took all these various engineering courses so that I know the terminology and I can have these conversations in these cross-functional groups. And, you know, quite frankly, I remember one of my undergraduate classes, I took a psychology class and a drama class. And I remember talking to my advisor saying, because I was struggling in these classes, these were the two classes that were like 200-person classes. And I was struggling with that. And I asked my advisors, why am I taking these classes? I am coming to school for engineering. Why do I need to take a drama and psychology class? And they said it's important in understanding how you become a well-rounded student. And I said, but does it matter at the end of the day? And he said, it does. And it's not until I started working that, yeah, absolutely, right? I need to understand how I'm going to work with people and learning how to read people and being a good team member, just as Rhythm was mentioning. Those, and you know, honestly, I don't know that it's even just relative to just engineering. I think it's any major as you're going away to school. Being a good teammate is just as important. And yes, I would totally study industrial engineering again. And for anyone who's thinking about studying engineering and you don't want to sit at a desk, I highly recommend looking at what industrial engineering is, if you don't know what it is already.
Chris, would you, if you had to do it all over again, would you go into architecture?
Yeah, I really I enjoy architecture. It's interesting with the architecture drawings that we have. I do believe that anyone could read our drawings. You know, we draw a door to look like a door, a window looks like a window, and a wall looks like a wall, certainly. It's a visual profession, which I enjoy. You know, I struggle with things like music or world languages or things where you're looking at like a graphic symbol that represents something you hear. Like that kind of stuff is very hard for my brain to process, but things that I can see, and this is definitely a profession where it's about what you can see. And it's also a profession where, and I don't know if this is widely known, but the knowledge to be an architect is like a mile wide and an inch deep. is kind of the best way to describe it, where almost anything is like fair game to ask an architect during design of a building. So, we have to understand, if a mechanical engineer is talking about a VAV, what is that? We don't have to understand mechanics of how it works. We have to at least recognize, what that means, right? Um, so it requires, and during the exam process to become licensed, I was studying things about, electrical current and AC/DC and things that I haven't really used directly in the field, right? But you definitely have to have a broad knowledge of buildings as well as landscape too, and topography and how they work with the earth, that sort of thing.
Okay, we have I think there's next text message in the chat says, any recommendations or advice on being a mechanical engineer? I mean, I know that none of you are a mechanical engineer, but I don't know if Jen and Rosa have any, I guess, understanding of what a mechanical engineer does and what it takes to, I guess, what subjects they would need to study to be one.
Think in high school, the same thing, math and science. I have a lot of, friends from college that ended up in as a mechanical engineer, but it's spread across so many things. Like you can have someone who is a designer for sheet metal in a building, like what Chris was saying, or you can have someone who designs nitty-gritty little parts. So it really spans, or even like tools, airplanes. It really varies to what mechanical engineering is, and there really isn't a limit. I think you just need to do a little research to see what part of mechanical engineering you're interested in. My roommate from college, she's now in New Mexico where she's designing bombs from a mechanical engineering degree. So it's like so widespread, and you can do so many things with it.
There's also the manufacturing engineering part. There's a lot of in operations, a lot of mechanical engineers, once they've done the design work, they actually decide that they want to go to manufacturing or operations and actually do the implementation or the building and the assembly. So a lot of mechanical engineers go into that. So I don't know if the question is more for what's like the subjects needed to study to become a mechanical engineer. I mean, it's a lot of physics. It's the statics, dynamics. I think a lot of the classes were similar from what I remember to like the civil stuff. But as far as I will warn, or not warn, but I will preface that, a lot of people go to college and they say, I want to be a mechanical engineer. But I'd really suggest looking at, well, what is it about a mechanical engineer that you want to become? Because like, as Rosa mentioned, you study mechanical engineering, but there's so much that you can do with that degree. So really think about what you want to do with the degree once you've completed it. There's manufacturing engineering, for example, at Cal Poly, and I had friends who were studying that, and they were building parts off the machines. And so a friend of mine thought that's what she was going to be doing as a manufacturing engineer. No. So as a manufacturing engineer, she would be the person who's writing the procedures and designing the assembly instructions. And then a technician would be the one who's actually making the parts off the line. And she thought, well, that's not fun. She liked actually doing the actual work. And so really understand what you'd really like to do. If you say, I want to be a mechanical engineer, I want to be an industrial engineer, I want to be a civil engineer, think about what you actually, how you're going to apply that, and then think about, go backwards from there.
Good advice. Let's have one person who's raising their hand. S.
Hi, yeah, I'm Shrida. And I had a question like for all of them, like are these fields like they entertain the hybrid work environment, or like it will be like a fully filled work, like you have to go to 9 to 5 to office, like how it is flexible? I mean, yeah. Hello?
Yeah, so I have a hybrid work environment Currently, we're in the office 3 days a week, and I can work from home 2 days a week.
Mhm.
I'm mostly field-based, only because can't really build construction without being in the fields, but I do have the opportunity to work from home every once in a while.
Okay.
The firm that I work at, we all work in the office 5 days a week, 8 to 5. I understand there are some firms that allow some opportunity to work remotely or outside of conventional business hours, but I think a lot of firms are still sticking to the Monday to Friday 8 to 5.
Does that answer your question, SS?
Yeah. I have a couple of more questions, but maybe like if others they want to ask, then it's okay.
Yeah. Well, let me get through some in the chat, and then we could come back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
You could keep your hand up. I'll just come back to you later. Okay.
Okay.
There's one
Thank
person
you.
in the chat that wrote, is studying for the FE and PE exams a part of ABT certification? And how did that impact your career?
So ABET is really, if you decide to go this route, most of the time you want to look for a college that is ABET accredited. And that means by the end of your 4-year college time, you end up taking the FE, which is the fundamental engineering exam. And that's really like your step one, if you decide you want to be a professional engineer. So studying for the FE really didn't impact any part of my career. My career didn't start yet, because it was just after I graduated. But it's really part of the school process, I would say, unless, and if you decided to go the PE route, then I think it would make a difference. I didn't choose the PE route. I got my FE and then just stopped there because I decided I didn't want to be a PE.
Do you have anything to add, Jen, or no?
I don't. I didn't go the route of doing either the FE or the PE.
Okay, that's fine. There's a question for Chris. Somebody wrote, what do you recommend for in terms of when you're taking classes for high school, for if you want to major in architecture? Is there some certain classes in high school that you should look into taking? Is there an intersection of art and architecture that one can pursue? And is there a transition one can make from architecture to UX/UI design, or vice versa?
That's a good question. So when I was in high school, I was a art student. I took art all 4 years, and I was also in the art club for all 4 years. And through that, we did things like building sets for the drama club, and so it was that my high school didn't offer a whole lot of class choices as far as things that got close to architecture. I did take a drafting class, although that was really just drawing with hand drafting machine parts. But actually, when I started studying architecture, which was in 1996, we were incoming freshmen. We were still hand drafting everything. The transition to computers took place a few years after that, and by the time I graduated, computers and having the software was mandatory for getting into the architecture program. As far as the intersection of art and architecture, there's public art that would be like sculptures and installations like that, something that's three-dimensional, right? Something would have to stand on its own, which is art, but it's let's say bigger than a canvas, right? And then the transition between architecture and the UX and UI, we don't know a whole lot about that, but we did have had a colleague working here a few years ago who studied architecture, and after she left our office, she went into UX design. So it can be done, you know that.
Thanks, Chris. The next question in the chat, I guess directed to all of you. How often is your career a stressful job? And how do you, I guess, balance it, you know, in life, the life-work balance, right? That everybody faces. I mean, is engineering, is being an engineer, is being an architect, you know, a very stressful, long hours type of job?
For me, it is, I hate to say it, it is very stressful. I have long hours. I get in the office at 7:30 in the morning, and I don't leave till 5 or 6 or 7. And sometimes I work on the weekends. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. It's not for the weak, but very rewarding.
I would say that I find balance. Hours are sometimes long, so I'd say that it comes and goes with launches. I talked about the product launches, satellite launches, and so forth. So there are times that, yes, there are long days. But I also have 2 children and I coach their little leagues. And oh, by the way, I am coaching over at your high school right now. I'm an assistant softball coach there. And so I make time for that. So I prioritize making time for me and my family and the things that are important. But if I don't, I could definitely let myself spend more time at work. And I think that it is, but I think that that's with any job. I think it's what we think is important. The products that I work on right now are surgical robots, and they're super awesome. And what Rosa is probably working on is probably, she puts together civil engineering objects that are like, probably, I don't know what she's making, but I know civil engineers make bridges, right? And that ensures that we have places to go safely. So, and the architectural part is buildings. And so, and I'm not going to talk for Chris, but any job, whether it's in engineering or anywhere else, could be stressful and long hours. And so I think it's kind of general to say that any job is going to be balanced. But I think that we try to do our best to try to make it how we are willing, what we're willing to do.
So for me, at any sort of given moment, I have about 16 to 20 projects that I'm working on. And if somebody would have told me that back when I was in high school, I was going to juggle that many projects, I would have probably felt overwhelmed at the thought of it. But it doesn't just happen overnight, right? It happens over the course of a career, just taking on more and more responsibility as I can demonstrate that I can handle the responsibility. And there are people in our office who are carrying even more projects than that. As it gets stressful, or how do I deal with that? There are moments where it gets a little bit stressful. To me, and I know it sounds cliche, but I would say knowledge is power. And for me, oftentimes stress is the not knowing factor. You know, if I have a bunch of emails piling up that I haven't looked at them, if you don't know what they are and what they're asking you to do, you're going to assume worst case, like, oh, these are probably, you know, things that are going to require a lot of time. But then if you actually read through them, then you're like, well, no, there's actually not that much to do once you actually understand what needs to be done. The firm I work at, we don't work weekends. I haven't worked a weekend in quite a long time. But it's not true of the profession on the whole, because I have worked places that did work weekends and did work late. But that's not where I'm at now. I appreciate that I work you know, the relatively normal 40 to 45 hour work week. And like Jen was saying, like how you've got kids and they're in sports, and it's good to be able to go to their games and to to keep the work-life balance.
Thanks, you guys. It's good to know. Let's go back to SS, who had some more question, and then after we can go to MM.
Hi. Yeah. So now, like, looks like coding is part of the so many fields. So now is it compulsory? Like you should know the programming language, some Python, you have some automation, some tools. Like, is it essential? Like student they should know coding. That's the question. Yeah.
I took, well, I think the type of coding is different. I think I took a C. Well, yeah, I took a C class for my computer science class. And then I took for a manufacturing engineering course, there was some automation. I think it's probably dependent on the type of engineer. If you're talking about engineering, I think it might be dependent on the type of study you're looking at.
Yeah, same. I had only taken one programming course in college, but it was called MATLAB. It was really just to understand or think logically. But we didn't really program like in school or even in my career now.
Okay. Mhm.
And there wasn't anything like that hard for architecture.
Okay. MM, do you have a question?
Yes, this question is for Chris. I was wondering, I know internships, they take a long time for architecture. So let's say the time when someone enrolls into an architecture school till the time they become an architect after giving the exam, how long do you expect that to take? How many years?
Good question. So for me, I became licensed when I was 32. When I look back, there was and Youngpei mentioned I have a master's degree. That wasn't a requirement for getting a license. So I didn't take the absolute fastest possible path. But I know people who've gotten licensed in their late 20s. That's about as fast as possible to do.
Okay. And overall, for architecture, are there like a few schools that are like, really good that, let's say within California or outside, which you would definitely say, they're like the top notch for architecture, even when you graduated or even right now?
Yeah, in our firm, most people either came from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo or from UC Berkeley, those programs. And of course, that could also be geographically, that they're relatively close to our company.
Okay. And any colleges outside of California that are well known?
There's a publication called Design Intelligence that ranks the schools each year. And that's just based on, they survey practitioners, practicing architects, and ask who have you had the, of the people that you've hired, right? Who have you had the best performance from relative to where they went to school. That's like they look at it that way, and then they rank the programs accordingly. But you could look at that ranking to see where schools are in.
Okay. Can you repeat the publication again?
It's called Design Intelligence.
Design Intelligence.
All one word. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And one last question. For you mentioned at that time you took courses, which were offered at that time, but right now the students, do they need to be proficient in like physics and a lot of science courses to become an architect, or something like psychology would help?
so once I got to college, I did not take any classes. This may have changed too over the years, but for the way it was when I was in college, I didn't take any classes that were specifically science classes or specifically math classes. Although there were a lot of classes I took in the architecture department that used physics or used math. You know, classes like structures and things like that, but they never like sent us out to some other department to just do a math class or something like that.
Okay. So if a student had a choice to take like a statistics class versus a physics class, you would recommend the physics for architecture?
Yes, I would say the physics would be more useful.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
SS, did you have any other question?
No, actually, I got the answers. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, if you could put your hands down, then I could see that we got through those questions. I think. Let's see, send me message. Exam. Okay. I think this probably goes back to maybe engineering. The exams mentioned. So I know on my slideshow it said to become an engineer, you take the PE, the FE exams. But Jen, you said you didn't go those route, and Rosa, you said that you didn't really go that route. So, so what exam is mandatory that you have to take to go into engineering?
I don't think there's a one size fit all to answer that question, only because it depends what kind of engineer you want to be. If you want to be design engineer, maybe going the route of, going to engineering school, passing the FE, getting your PE might be the route if that's what you want to go through. My title for me is I'm a project engineer, but I don't design. I'm really just I work on a management team. So I think it just really depends what you're looking for.
Okay. Jen, did you have anything to add or no?
Yeah, from what I understood, the PE exam is for the folks who have a stamp, right? They're stamping that something is designed properly. And again, for industrial engineers, that's not something that we do. So for folks that don't know what industrial engineers do, we're usually the type of engineer that optimizes things, right? I talked a lot about solving problems and puzzles, and I am a type of person who likes to optimize things. So like finding opportunities and filling gaps and finding process improvements. Those are the types of puzzles that I like to solve. So there's no exam for an industrial engineer to complete when graduating. It's really just conferring my degree, and where then I can apply for opportunities and find a job.
Okay. And I think a lot of parents probably would be wondering because their kids are in high school now. And you mentioned engineering maybe requires a lot of math. You took math. Both of you took math and maybe physics or some science. So would it matter the classes that they take in high school? Like if they take math, they should go into like I think in Irvington there's like a double accelerated math, and should they take all that? And there's also calculus offered later on. Should they take that all before they hit college? Or, will they still end up, if they go into engineering in college, that they will have to take more of these type of math classes in science?
Wow. We're talking about a long time ago, because I think there's placement tests from what I remember. So I know that for the math side of the house, I didn't start in I took college prep courses at Mission, and so I didn't start calculus right away. I actually started with algebra 2 trig. I think there were some folks that started with calculus right away, and so Cal Poly is a quarter system. So that just meant I took an extra quarter of math. But for me, I think that was appropriate for me, right? So I started with algebra 2 trig prior to getting into calculus. But I know that there are also Ohlone College, a high school students can take courses at Ohlone. At the time, I'm sure it's still the same today. You could take those courses, high school students could take courses at Ohlone for free. So I know for my general ed courses, my mom had signed me up to take English. So I had taken I think there were 2 English courses. I started my sophomore year and my sophomore summer and my junior summer, I took English 101A and English 101B at Ohlone. And so those counted for 3 quarter classes at Cal Poly, for example. So I got a head start on English, although I started with I didn't get a head start in my math, for example. So again, I think each student every student's going to finish. How fast they finish through their courses, I don't know that necessarily matters. I think that the pace that the student goes is going to be appropriate for that student. I don't think that there's a need to mad rush the student through. But there are opportunities. I think if you take an AP class, for example, I think that might count for some credits or something like that as well. You'd have to talk to your career counselor.
Anything to add, Rosa?
I mean, I think it really depends on like the admissions process of like that college and what specifically you're looking for. You know, I think it might be geared school to school, but otherwise, if you have the opportunity to take advanced math and science classes, I would suggest doing so. I don't think it's mandatory. I think it's always good, if anything, to have a initial, you know, dipping your toes into it, and then you'll see it again in college, if anything, just tweaked up a little bit. So I think it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt, but I don't think it's mandatory.
Okay, and I had another question about internships. So the 3 of you work at different companies, and I don't know if, just based on your own experience at your company, if there's internships for interested either engineers or architect at either high school level, or does internship usually start at the college level?
Turner has internships from even the high school level. Depending on, you know, what availabilities are. I can't speak for California since I'm based in New York, but we've met some high school students. Obviously the heavier of the interns are typically college students in the summer, but we do have college students in the winter as well. So it's definitely out there.
Jen and Chris, you wanna?
So our firm has had students, but they've been college students, architecture majors. There was a time about 10 years ago that we did have a relationship with Cristo Rey High School in San Jose, and they had students coming as part of their curriculum to help us around the office. But that was something structured through the school.
And I'm not sure about Intuitive. I know we have an internship program. I don't know if they hire high school students. My previous employers, Lockheed Martin and Abbott, I do believe they do hire high school students. It's a really tough program to get into as far as the high school internship programs, but I do believe that they do.
All right. Thanks for all of your input. I'll ask the parents or the kids, students on, is there any other questions you have for our speakers?
Yes, I had a question for Chris.
Okay.
Yes, so Chris, yeah, my son, he was looking into the field of art and architecture, and he was figuring out that, you know, once you get say start as an intern, for the first 2 or 3 years, there's a lot of time that you end up spending, and it's not a lot of times about pure architecture. It might be like all different kinds of projects. So is that the norm, that, you know, you kind of get your feet wet in the field, and then over time you learn a lot in the profession?
Yeah, good question. A lot of architecture firms do a lot of various different projects. And there aren't a whole lot of firms that specifically focus on just one thing. I did work in a firm, actually my first job out of college was only doing hospital interiors. That was kind of unusual. A lot of firms don't just focus so narrowly on one thing, but they cover kind of a wider range of building types. But that did sort of set the trajectory of my career in the sense that since then I've only worked on interiors of buildings. I don't work on what we call the core shell, which is the outside walls of the building, the restroom core, elevator core, stair core. I don't work on those parts of the building.
Okay.
I could with my license, I just don't have the experience.
Does that answer your question, MM?
Yeah, yes, it does. Thanks.
Thank you.
Before we end, I do want to first go back and talk about I want to thank all our speakers today for taking their time out, you know, and thank you so much, Rosa, from zooming in on New York time to be here and share your expertise and answer questions. On the screen is my contact information. If you, parents, if you have other questions that were not covered, or it comes up later on, and I can forward it to our speakers. Okay. Our next session next month that we're presenting is the business industry on March 14. So you want to maybe take note of that, especially if your child is interested into going to business. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Chris, thank Jen, thank Rosa again for sharing your great information, and I'm sure the parents all appreciated it, and also the students who are on here. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
you.
much, everybody.
Thank you.